Milo and Lena Graff have located the mysterious wild space planet where their parents are being held. Milo and Lena must infiltrate a secret base to free them. With an entire legion of Imperial troops to contend with, can the children at last succeed in the rescue?
Hello, younglings, and welcome back to Padawan Library, the Star Wars Junior Novel podcast. I'm Levi Paratic, and with me, Tim May.
Hey!
Today, we are talking about the final chapter, Book 6/7 of Adventures in Wild Space, The Rescue. But we're not only talking about that rescue, we're also talking about the rescuers. That's right.
The Rescue Aid Society.
The Rescue Aid Society, which I have a big issue with Down Under when we talk about that.
Okay, we're talking about both Okay, if you guys don't know, The Rescuers, the 1977 Disney animated film, and its theatrical sequel, made by the main studio. The Rescuers.
First Disney animated movie to have a sequel.
Really, one of only three still. A real, theatrical sequel. Made by the original studio. The other two are now Ralph Wrecks the Internet and Frozen 2.
Well, what about Jungle Book 2? Because that had a theatrical release.
That's a Disney Toons production, separate studio. That was going to be a straight-to-video movie, and then they were like, let's just throw it in theaters. And same with Return to Neverland. I know. Believe me, I know this stuff. All right. So, The Rescuers Down Under from 1990. We'll get to that in a bit. The Rescuers in general, kind of minor Disney movies. I don't think they're they don't have a huge legacy in terms of a big fan base or anything.
Right. I agree. The only thing I could think of legacy is I wonder if Chippendale Rescue Rangers.
Well, that's based on Chip and Dale.
I figured
Disney
the
characters from
part,
the
I
classic
don't know if
era.
they were let's do a cartoon about the Rescue Aid
Well, I
Society.
think that's probably likely now that I think about it, because they... I was looking at the Wikipedia page for The Rescuers, and it was re-released several times in the 80s and was successful every time. That's why they ultimately made the sequel. And we were joking at the end of the last episode. And we'll talk about Down Under in a minute, but... Well, actually, I'll get to this when we get to it. Let's talk about the first movie, which is... I don't remember the other two directors, but this is the last movie that was kind of headed up by Wolfgang Ryderman, who...
The other two are John Lounsbury and Art Stevens.
Sure, but you also have to remember directing on a Disney movie, especially... in the pre-Renaissance era, is not as, it's much more, it's a much broader concept. But Wolfgang Ryderman was kind of the biggest, most important animator of the 60s and 70s at Disney. He's been there, he had been there much longer, but he, I believe the first movie he has a co-directing credit on is Sleeping Beauty, but he's not the main guy on that movie. I think he kind of takes over with 101 Dalmatians and Sword in the Stone and Jungle Book and all that stuff. And then you get the 60s and 70s stuff, the post-Walt stuff, Aristocats and Robin Hood and the Winnie the Pooh movie. And then this is the last one. This is because... And so this feels like the last... And in a lot of ways, this movie, I think, feels like the end of the second... I mean, there's really probably more eras than two up to this point, but this is the end of the first post-Walt era, I guess is what I'd say,
Yeah.
because after this you get into, Fox and the Hound and Black Cauldron, the real doldrum years. And I know some people like those movies. I mean, Fox and the Hound is straight trash, but and Black Cauldron is like a movie you want to be good, but isn't really actually good. But this one feels like it has the most. It feels like you can trace this back to like some classics, whereas then there's that transitional period, and we'll talk about that a little more with Down Under, but.
Synergy when Down Under is, that's the big term those big executives are throwing around.
We'll talk all about Down Under when we get to it. But The Rescuers, though, I gotta say, I rewatched this movie. I don't even know if I saw this when I was a kid. I know I saw the second one, but I don't know if I saw it when I was a kid. I saw this again 3 or 4 years ago, and I think the reason I brought up Wolfgang Ryderman, and I don't know if it's fair to credit him specifically, but his era at Disney, the 60s and 70s, has a very distinct aesthetic. So starting with 101 Dalmatians, this kind of like, they use the Xerox process that I think contributes to it, but this very scratchy line, and it's a cheaper process than the kind of like the lush classic Disney of the 40s and 50s, but it has a very distinctive vibe. And this movie, what really I think sets it apart is that it is super. I'm talking about visually here. Super dark, super like wet, and like very like, and just like. It enjoys it just playing around in the muck. Obviously, the story is also distressing in some ways, but
just a little bit.
I mean, it's about a kid who's kidnapped by an insane woman.
Pawn woman. She owns a pawn store.
A pawn shop owner who wants a diamond, and in order to get the diamond, you have to crawl through a tiny hole, so she needs a small person, so she kidnaps a child.
Yeah, kidnaps a child in New York City and then brings the child to Louisiana.
To the bayou, baby.
The bayou. They're living in like an abandoned houseboat with her pet alligators. Medusa is crazy. Like, Medusa is like crazy scary.
And it's like an incredible character.
Yeah.
I was reading that apparently they originally pitched it as that this would be Cruella de Vil from 101 Dalmatians, that she would return as a villain, but then one of the animators was just like, we don't do sequels, which is funny considering this is the first movie that gets a sequel.
Well,
but
I was reading that this was originally developed by, they started initial development on this when Walt was still around, and then Walt apparently did not agree with the politics of the film, and he shelved it.
That's interesting.
What it says on the Wikipedia
I don't
page.
know what the... I'm not
Unless
sure.
Unless it's like the UN stuff or
maybe
whatever.
US hated the UN, I guess. Because there's not like a particularly distinctive political point of view, I would say.
No,
like,
there is not.
But yeah, no, so that's the other thing. The main characters, of course, are Bernard and Bianca. Incredible characters.
I agree.
So beautiful, so adorable. And they're members of the Rescue Aid Society, which is a tiny UN underneath the real UN for mice from all over the world, delegates from all over the world. This is apparently the Rescue Aid Society's interpretation of what the UN does, which is when there's trouble, like a crime has been committed. It's not even like international crime. It's when a crime has been committed, they send a couple agents to go help and rescue people. So I love anything with a small animal version or like a version of something that's underneath the same thing. Like, this is actually another Disney movie, The Great Mouse Detective, has a similar thing where the mouse version of Sherlock Holmes lives right underneath the real Sherlock Holmes, which is just delightful,
That is delightful. It's actually funny, whenever I had like a Mandela effect, one of those sort of phenomenons with this movie, because it was like, I had the two of those movies like confused in my head because that was anher movie I watched a lot. Was
That's
The Great Mouse
a
Detective.
fantastic movie.
Yeah.
That's a great movie.
And I will say, when Mel pulled out my print, her print of this film, the VHS copy.
Her print. What are you
Prove me wrong.
about?
It's a print.
Oh,
by
God.
all means, it's a print.
You maniac.
But when she pulled out the print, looking at the cover, and I was like, oh, that's right. I have these two confused. Speaking of the UN delegates, did you notice? Mel noticed this. That there is one mouse representing all of Africa.
Oof. That's rough. I didn't notice that specifically. I will say, in general, the mice, in terms of how they're depicted, I mean, they're not really main characters, obviously, but in terms of what they look like, don't look too bad or stereotypical.
No, nothing was super effective.
But yeah, that's a classic. That's classic bullshit.
Apparently on the Wikipedia page, there was something that people found offensive when the movie came out on home video.
Oh, I know about this. Yeah.
Nudity scandal. This is
classic horny Disney animators throwing something
right?
in.
So what happened was when Bianca and Bernard are on the bird, whose name I can't remember at this point, at one point they pass a window. They're in New York City, and some animator put a photo of a topless woman in one of the windows, expecting nobody would ever be able to see it frame by frame.
Like 2 frames, and then it was noticed on the 99 release, which I assume means the first DVD release, which is where you could the first time you could probably even see it.
Right.
And and they had to recall it and take it out. They didn't reveal who the culprit was. I wonder if that means they still work at the studio at that time. But I mean, whatever. It's obviously harmless. But it's just it's very fun. There's so much crap like that, in Disney movies. But that's one of the only true ones, really. A lot of the other ones are kind of bullshit stories, that's the sex in Lion King, that's not real, or people are one of the barnacles in the background, a Little Mermaid, looks like a dick. I was like, you think it looks like a dick? That's what that is. That's not
Well, there was a similar thing. This isn't Disney. This is Buena Vista, but they were
Buena Vista is Disney.
Yeah, and Roger Rabbit. There's a little line. All I'll say. There's a line, they had to go over that line in future releases of that film.
Yeah.
So,
but Roger Rabbit is.
It works in Roger
and
Rabbit.
It's complete. Roger Rabbit's not the same kind of thing. So
it's like sleaze.
That's the
there's
problem.
So much sleaze going on in Roger.
It's supposed to be sleaze. I love Roger Rabbit. A perfect movie.
I agree. Could not agree anymore. That might be. I will tell you, that's one of the most truest things I agree with you.
Yeah, I know. It's one of the great movies. Period. A perfect film. In every way. We're not being controversial here. Everybody likes that movie. Anyway, so the first Rescuers though, I don't know. I just love the look of it. I love the music is awesome. And it just has super 70s vibes. And I'm super into the 70s lately. 70s cinema, 70s pop cinema, not just the new Hollywood stuff, but also just generic product from the 70s. I just the music, the songs in it have this real distinct free to be you and me vibe that I love. And I'm just super into everything about it. I was vibing on this movie pretty hard this morning.
The song "Somebody's Waiting for You" was, of course, Academy Award nominated. It says right on the VHS cover, it includes
77. What did it lose to?
I don't know. We'll have to look into that.
Okay, well,
apparently this movie outgrossed Star Wars in France.
Yeah, I don't know if that's on its initial release it said on Wikipedia, so I don't know. It came out around the same time as Star Wars, of course. Yeah, 77. So June 22nd, 77. So
wow,
not long after Star Wars. But
let's see. I'm on the Oscars page here. Let's see here. Best Original Song. Okay, what one was "You Light Up My Life" from "You Light Up My Life"? Apparently,
I've heard that song, but that's
God.
that era where there would be a song that's way more popular than the movie.
Yeah, just like St. Elmo's Fire.
Yeah,
that's
well, I don't know about that. I disagree that that's more popular than the movie.
Candle on the Water from Pete's Dragon. This song,
I
incredible.
hate Pete's Dragon. I love the new Pete's Dragon. Hate the old Pete's Dragon. The new Pete's Dragon's a masterpiece. I'm not joking about that.
We also have Somebody's Waiting for You from The Rescuers. The Slipper and the Rose Waltz from The Slipper and the Rose. And this is the one song that I would say should have won. Nobody Does It Better from Spy Who Loved Me.
Oh.
That song. I love that song.
Yeah, that should have won. I'm shocked. Wait. Didn't Saturday Night Fever, was that 78 then?
Oh, it must be. How is that, like, not on?
Because there's, like, 15... It should have been all Saturday Night Fever.
It would have been all... Yeah, it should
More than
like,
a Woman should have won. Easily.
Yeah, I agree. All right, let's go to the 51st here. It's gotta be in the 51st.
Is it?
Where is it? No, it's not. There's nothing.
Wow, they must have gotten disqualified or something because maybe like one of the songs appeared on a previous Bee Gees album or something. Like, whatever. Who cares?
Bullshit.
But yeah, no, and it's interesting because last week I was making a joke that Michael Eisner was just like jealous of Crocodile Dundee at his old studio and demanded that they make an Australian themed film. And I thought that was like a joke. But then that's how The Rescuers of Down Under happened.
Him and Katzenberg. That's exactly what it was. Because like on the Wikipedia page, you can figure out that they announced Rescuers Down Under as their title before the script was even written. So like there was no development beyond this point other than like the fact that like Katzenberg was Australia, guys, go.
So it's interesting. This movie comes at an interesting period in Disney history, and it's also fairly significant for another reason we'll get to. But it's the next movie after Little Mermaid. So Little Mermaid is traditionally thought of as the true launching of like the Disney Renaissance era, and it is 100%. That movie's fantastic. I just saw it again recently. That's like such a fucking good movie. It's insane how good it is. It's like disrespectful, honestly, to other movies. Like it's like just stunting on other movies, I feel like. But this movie though feels so much more of the previous era. It feels very much like part of that 80s Disney, Fox and the Hound, Black Cauldron, Oliver and Company.
Because it's the same people from Oliver and Company, which by the way,
and Great Mouse Detective, which I love.
Only movie that Billy Joel has acted in. So
yeah, I mean Oliver and Company I have not seen in 25 years, so I can't say anything about it. But and so obviously that Renaissance thing was building for a while because like in some ways Great Mouse Detective is like sort of the beginning where like the younger animators were pitching their own ideas, and that's kind of, and even so I guess even Oliver and Company to a degree is part of that, although nobody thinks of it as part of that. And then Little Mermaid comes, it blows the door open. Obviously, it figures out the new formula. It's not just reiterating on the old Disney formula, but it's like a new Disney formula. And then, but then this feels like leftovers, but it's also like this massive technical leap forward from The Little Mermaid, which still looks better, by the way. Let me say up front, because Rescuers Down Under is the first animated film to use the CAPS system, which I don't remember what CAPS stands for, but it's essentially where you scan drawings into a computer, and rather than filming each individual frame with a camera, you're animating it digitally. It's not really digital animation because it's all still drawn by hand and then scanned in. Except there's CG elements in this movie.
Yeah,
too,
I think they paint. They did the paint.
Yeah, I'm talking about the drawings though, but and they do ink and paint in the computer. So that's the difference between this and Little Mermaid. It's 1 year apart.
And not only can they do that, but they can create 3D environments.
Well, started earlier. That starts with Great Mouse Detective is the first movie that does that, and that movie does it better because what they did was there's this big climax in Great Mouse Detective where they that takes place inside Big Ben. So there's all these gears and stuff. So what they did is they rendered all these gears and then they printed out each frame and then traced over it in pencil and scanned that and photographed that for the background. So they did all the complex gear work was done with computer animation, but it still it melds with the character animation a lot better than in this movie where there's really like primitive computer environments. It's not like throughout the whole movie. There's only a few of them really, but
right.
The opening credits have a big one where it's
opening credits, and then you see when we're jumping from when all the mice are sending the telegrams, we globe trot, and that's 3D.
A whole 3D.
And then there's a big New York scene where and
then when they come into Sydney, they go through the opera house. There's stuff like that, and like the vehicles are starting to be CG enhanced, which becomes very standard within a few years. Like the next year is Beauty and the Beast. And that movie has obviously a very famous CG aided
the ballroom scene,
ballroom sequence, and I think some people probably think that looks dated. I think that still looks good, but that's because they like make it this heightened sequence where like the fact that it looks weird works because the sequence is like a key moment where it's not just like, oh well, like these buildings are CGI, they look like so it's interesting.
A little geometric.
Oh, they look terrible. I mean, it's not, and I don't blame them. This is clearly the first movie that ever used it, and they essentially perfect the caps part of it. The caps part of it flattens everything, I feel like, in this movie. Like, everything feels much, there's some beautiful shots, like the stuff with the kid on the back of the bird is fantastic.
You mean the man-sized eagle?
Yeah. Oh, did you watch that featurette about it?
No, I didn't.
Oh no, because Glenn Keane is the the character animator on the bird and on the eagle, and he's talking about in this featurette that clearly was made at the time about how it's just like, well, when I studied eagles, I realized they're just like men or humans. And like he's just like the wings are like arms, and they have, and like no, that's why I was surprised. But
what's funny too is like the eagle, who is the largest animal in this movie, can't speak, but like all the other animals can, except for of course the dragon character. What's Jolene? Is that her name?
Right, something like that.
Yeah.
And we'll get to the story in 1 second. I just want to finish. Like I will say, like, you look at the caps system and how it evolved with Beauty and the Beast and Aladdin in the next couple of years. Those movies look leaps and bounds better than this. This, like, it does have this flattening effect for a lot of the action, I feel like. And the movie's just a little uglier in general.
Yeah, the movie kind of is like void of like that aesthetic that made like the first one kind of appealing.
It has no real atmosphere. It's like very bright, daytime movie.
And not only that too, getting into the story a little bit, like I feel like the rescuers themselves, Bernard and Bianca, are like a little like second fiddle in the story.
Well, that's the only thing they get really is that Bernard, because the first one it doesn't come right out and say it, but they fall in love over the course of the first movie.
Right.
And in this one, the story is essentially that Bernard is trying at the beginning to propose to Bianca, gets interrupted, and he tries several times throughout the movie, which, by the way, is the same story as Kristoff and Anna in Frozen 2. So notable rehash there.
Yeah, and like they don't show up till like a third of the movie because the first part opens with the boy Cody, which there's apparently there's stories about that too, where the animators wanted like an Aborigine sort of boy, and they wanted to cast an actual Australian actor for it, and Katzenberg was like, no, we need a blonde actor, and animate the kid as a blonde too, apparently. That was apparently from Katzenberg himself.
Yikes.
And then you also have like George C. Scott, who is like
he's playing the villain, this poacher character.
Who's not Australian either.
Yeah, there's very few, like, the only Australian character is this other mouse who is like part of, I guess, the Rescue Aid Society.
Which, they don't sing their song in that movie.
I know.
I was so pissed.
The music is so much worse.
The
music is so much worse. But they when Bianca and Bernard show up, like this Australian mouse clearly like is like vavoom, like like and about Bianca and so that guy's voiced, by the way, he's voiced. I don't remember the guy's name, but he's voiced by this actor who's like an Australian soap opera. He starred in General Hospital.
Oh wow!
And he's still on that show now. And like I brought up that I was going to watch this movie, and I to my mom, and my mom was like, "Oh yeah, I don't think I remember anything about the movie except that I think this guy from General Hospital is in it." Which I was shocked when she brought it up. I was like, because I had just read it on Wikipedia, and then she just brought. I was like, "What is happening?" But anyway, so this though is this is such an inferior sequel.
I agree.
Like, I feel like it's a lot of the spirit of adventure from the first movie and mystery is just gone. And aesthetically, while it's obviously a hugely important movie and it pushed the medium forward in a lot of ways, it doesn't get to reap any of those benefits because the movie's kind of ugly for the most part. Yeah, outside of those flying sequences, I think those are good. But
they spend so much time with the kid Cody, and then the Bianca and Bernard get like absolutely no story. They get to Australia, and boom, they're led right to him. Like they don't have to solve a mystery like they do in the first movie. Like there's in the first movie they go to the orphanage, they meet the cat, all that sort of.
Oh, the cat with the mustache.
The cat ruled. The cat was incredible.
Yeah, no. Oh man, that movie's so good. The first one is fantastic. Highest recommendation for me. But the sequel, I remember vaguely maybe seeing this movie when I was a kid. I had no real attachment to it, but I went to Letterboxd, which longtime listeners know I quit Letterboxd cold turkey last year, and I went to Letterboxd just to check and see what people thought about Rescuers Down Under, and there were a bunch of reviews that were like, "Oh, so much better than the first one," all this stuff, and it prompted me to be like, I need to make my return to Letterboxd to write a review, and I wrote my review, which was, if you think this movie is better than the first one, you are suffering from the purest form of 90s kid delusion. Like, go fuck yourself. Like, this is also like, it's from 1990, but it's like very 80s. And like, just the vibe. I mean, there is a little bit of that early 90s, like, kind of Ted Turner environmentalism going on, which, I have no real problem with, but is like, a little corny. Obviously I have no actual problem with, like, I'm against poaching and like obviously, but like, it's like, that Fern Gullyism, but, right. or Captain Planetism, but, which, again, I think I'm glad those things existed, and I wish more kids' entertainment dealt with those subjects.
Yeah, needs to come back. In, like,
of course, I just think there's maybe more effective ways of doing it than a bad
Captain
movie.
Planet.
But that's fine. And so that part doesn't bother me, but like the kid is like such an 80s kid moppet. Like, especially like the most diluted version of like an Amblin, of like an E.T. kid. Like, it's like, it's a whole decade of E.T. kids dwindled down into nothing, you know what I mean?
Well, he sounds so much like Macaulay Culkin, too.
Oh, yeah, well, this came out the same day as Home Alone.
Yeah, okay, so
that's why it was like kind of a bomb.
This kid, his name is Adam Ryan, and he was active between 1990 and 1994, and one of his other big movies is Child's Play 2, which also came out the same day as this movie. So this movie opened same weekend as Home Alone, which was the highest grossing movie of 1990.
One of the biggest hits of all time.
Rocky 5.
A classic.
Child's Play 2, and then The Rescuers Down Under. And that's the order that they opened in the box office. And because the movie performed so poorly in that opening weekend, Katzenberg he pulled all of the advertising for the movie. Like, he had zero faith in the movie, and Disney chopped up the movie as like a failure, like after the first weekend.
And it's not like, it's not a total disaster. It's watchable. It's just very generic. It feels very much like a name we haven't brought up in this conversation is Don Bluth, who, of course, worked on the first one and then a few years later defected from Disney and started his own studio, made, Secret of Nim and An American Tail and Land Before Time and those movies, and then made a bunch of real junk in the 90s. This feels like Bluth junk from the 90s, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I agree.
And I love some of the early Bluth movies, by the way. American Tail, I think, is like maybe a masterpiece, honestly. This just feels very much like in line with whatever, Thumbelina or Rockadoodle, that kind of bullshit.
Fievel Goes West.
Yeah, like the sequel, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, but the first one, very fun.
I agree.
And I think in that era, that 60s, 70s, like that post-Walt era is like fairly entertaining. I think Robin Hood gets the most love from that era, even though it's probably my least favorite of that period. Like that post-Walt, which is Aristocats, Robin Hood, Winnie the Pooh, and Rescuers. I think I like Robin Hood least of those four movies. But that's the one that's survived, and that's fine. I love Robin Hood, the character. I'm just not as big into the Disney Robin Hood. I had other Robin Hoods mattered more to me as a child, so I think it's just but yeah.
And one more little final tidbit about this that I found out on Wikipedia. They were running behind schedule on it, and they needed more animators. So at Disney MGM Studios, they had a small animation building, basically, and that was just
this
there
is
to
in
produce.
Florida, by the way, for
in
non-park
Florida.
freaks.
Yeah, in Orlando, and they had 10 animators who were really, the studio was just to make like shorts, but they were like, we need animators now.
I think the only movie they fully made there was Lilo and Stitch, and then it closed.
Oh, well, that's a shame. But
I mean, that was years later, but I think that's the only movie that was ever fully animated in that studio.
But, so this was the first feature they had to work on. There were 10 animators, and they contributed 10 minutes to this film. So each animator contributed a full minute to this movie.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Yeah, no, and Glenn Keane, I mentioned earlier, was the character animator on The Eagle in the second one, but I think The Rescuers, the first one, is the first movie he worked on at Disney, and he's obviously like a hugely important Disney figure.
Is he a Disney legend? Does
he must have the award. If he does, I mean, he doesn't work there anymore because they never let him direct his own movie because he was like the best character animator basically. And now he made a movie for Netflix last year, I think, and he made that Kobe short film that won an Oscar or something. Dear Basketball or whatever. But anyway, yeah, check out the first one. Second one, not so good. I'm sure that some of our listeners are like, I like the second one. These guys are heartless, whatever. But it's what it is. Both are available on Disney Plus. I watched it on my Blu-ray, of course. But,
Nice. Yeah. So next week, what are we doing next week, Tim?
Well, next week we're returning to Junior Jedi Knights, correct?
And we're reading Anakin's Quest.
So we're sticking with animation, and we're going to watch The Quest for Camelot, the Warner Brothers animated film from 1998, which I believe you can rent on all the usual places. I don't know if it's currently streaming anywhere. Probably not. It could I guess it could be on HBO
It could
Max.
be on the Max, yeah.
But
let's see here. Yeah, it's available pretty much everywhere you would get your movies at. It's actually, is it on Netflix? No, it is not on Netflix. It brought me to Netflix for some reason, pretending like it was on there. It's not.
But you can rent it on Apple, Amazon, Google Play, YouTube, Vudu.
All the places. All the places.
So it's also available if you have the Hoopla, the library streaming service, connected to your library. You can get it for free on that. So
nice.
There you go.
All right, well, when we come back, Adventures in Wild Space, number 6, The Rescue by Tom Huddleston.
It is Huddleston?
My book says Huddleston.
So does mine.
I'll have to look at it.
All right, we'll talk.
Well, we both have the same version.
Oh.
The horrible Eric Carle freaking Tarkin on the cover. So disgusting.
We'll talk. All right, stay tuned, everybody. Welcome back to Padawan Library. I'm Tim May, here, as always, with my friend and co-host, Levi Parafit.
Oh, thank you, friend.
Oh, yes. So here we are to wrap up a series. Always a big deal when we get to do this. Adventures in Wild Space. We're just going to say number 6, even though it's the 7th book.
This book was very, very exciting.
I agree.
Is how I'll start this. This book put a huge smile on my face.
This is The Rescue, and it's by Tom Huddleston. We confirmed that during the break.
There was some confusion last week over, of course, Book 5 was written by Cavan Scott, but the U.S. version miscredits it to Tom, yeah. So,
I'll say this. This book is a little beefier than the others. Probably an extra 40 pages or so. And befitting a finale, of course. And I really enjoyed this series. That's the big takeaway. We'll talk about it at the end, but this I think wrapped it up in a pretty satisfying way, all things considered. And it's just a fun series. I want more of this from the new canon in this area.
I agree. This might be one of our better endings to a series, in my opinion, in terms of the Jude stuff has its own ending. Jude is way above everybody else.
Reckoning is the number one, but that
agree.
is a masterpiece. But,
I agree.
all the other
but in terms of what else we read, this is way up there in terms of endings, in my opinion.
Absolutely, I agree. And so, let's get into it. The last book wrapped up with the kids escaped an ice planet, and
the clutches of Captain Corda, who is presumed dead.
I guess because he does not show up in this book. And now they know where their parents are being held, which is this planet. What's the planet called again?
The planet is Argyris. Oh
yes.
Agaris,
maybe?
Agaris. Yeah. Agaris, yes.
So, they are headed there. This is a planet that the Graf parents had previously mapped, because they're cartographers, if you remember. They had mapped it before the children were born, so many years ago. But they were taken back by the Empire, including Tarkin himself. I'm not sure what his rank is at this point. But he is, if you remember, the last book ended with him about to interrogate the parents. So Milo and Lena and Crater have taken Captain Corda's ship and are headed to Agaris. Sorry.
Yes, and they get there. It's covered in fog. All right, that sort of thing, and there's giant mushrooms. It's a fungi planet. Yes. So, and they're on the Imperial comms because Corda he sliced in to the Imperial broadband network, and they hear the TIE fighters talking, and they're like, "Look out for those stalks." And they're like, stalks? What's going on? We don't know what that is. So then from there, we jump to Chapter 2, the Scorched World, where we got Tarkin there. Tarkin, he is on the planet because the Empire is trying to mine it for quadanium. Quadanium is what they're trying to mine. And we meet a droid. This droid is K4D8. He is the same type of droid as K2SO.
I'm just going to say that droid.
That droid, okay.
Because there's no other droid besides Crater and him, so...
Yeah, but that droid, he has an owner director Orson Krennic is his master. So Krennic, he apparently sends that droid to come check on Tarkin to see what Tarkin's up to. And there's a part in the books where the stormtroopers are talking like, "Oh, do you see like Krennic sent that droid to like spy on Tarkin?" And it's like, "Yeah, I hear these two hate each other." And it's like, how insulting to send a droid. Like,
yeah, it's amusing. But Tarkin's talking to the Graf parents, and he essentially is like pretends that they have apprehended the kids, and then and he wants information from them about the planet, and that will help them essentially, clear it so that it can be used so they can mine it and make weapons. The parents obviously refuse, but Tarkin issues an ultimatum that is a super hard. He says, "I'll give you 1 day to change your minds," he said. "Then I promise you our next conversation will be over the bodies of your children." That is so insanely hard.
Tarkin goes really hard in this book, and there's like a lot. Like I feel like with this book series, there's like we haven't like stopped to read a lot of these books, but I have like a lot in this book specifically. Cool. All right, so from there, the children they're trying to evade TIE fighters. And suddenly they see one of these stalks that they're talking about, and it's like a giant mushroom cannon, and it shoots out this giant spiked ball, which hits the side of their ship. They crash. They realize that stormtroopers are coming because they're on an Imperial planet. And Crater, he gets impaled by this spiked ball. The spiked ball has gone through his astromech torso, and he just tells the children, "Run, like get out of here." So of course the kids run. At that point they have to abandon Crater, and so they're trying to run from the stormtroopers when the stormtroopers who are chasing them are suddenly knocked out by like a gas. And then they see something coming at them in the smoke, and then they too are knocked out by this gas. And when they awake, they're surrounded by mushroom people. These are
mushroom people. I agree. And there are all these people that are able to. This main guy is able to speak English. We find out his name is basically impossible to pronounce in English or in basic, but it's spelled Huffer, and I was just calling him Heifer, like the guy from Rocko's Modern Life.
Rocko's Modern Life, yeah.
And so, because like there's nothing else to say, like Huffer, I'm not like
it's like HHFFRRR, like it's literally just a sound. And when he comes, these mushroom people, they have no eyes. And he thinks that they are the children's parents because they smell like the children do. The children smell like the parents, I guess. And then they have to like explain, no, these are our parents. Our parents have been taken captive. That we know they're being held in this Imperial compound. Can you help us? And he says, well, no, I can't. Because there's this power core in the Imperial building or whatever, and it emits vibrations that causes the mushroom people to go insane. So like he can get them close, but he can't get them in. So that's where we're at here.
And so so he basically like leads them on this. Like the path is weird. Like it's like
the path is weird. Well, they fly at one point. He also reveals that the stormtroopers that keep disappearing, they are not killing. They're just keeping them fed and asleep. Yeah. So they have like hundreds of stormtroopers.
There's a great illustration of them there,
just sleeping. There's Z's too.
Yeah,
to show that they're sleeping and not.
I always say the illustrations make the mushroom people look so funny. Like that's great.
Yeah, I know. They're wild. Yeah. Like because they have multiple arms and stuff.
Yeah, they're great. Definitely post some illustrations on the social.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, the mushroom people.
And they but yeah, they wind up flying there. Essentially, the kids get there. But also, by the way, we forgot to mention that when they went off trying to walk towards the thing before they meet the mushroom people, the Imperials get Crater's head.
Yes, the
forgot to
Imperials
mention
do
that.
capture
They
Crater.
capture Crater's head specifically, not his body. Because his body was impaled, by the way. There's a great illustration of him getting impaled.
Yeah, I know. And there's when
and Crater's head, if you remember, has all the data from the parents.
Right, and then this is where Tarkin. This is hard. There's an illustration of Tarkin with Crater's head, and he goes to the parents, and he's just like, I have what I need. Like, I don't need you anymore, essentially, and I'm gonna kill your children. And they're still like, you're bluffing. Let us see your children, which he is bluffing. So from there, the children, okay, so the Grafs escape, like the parents escape, as they are, because they find a mushroom growing in their cell, and the mother, whose name I can't remember, she uses it on the stormtroopers. They pass out, they escape. They're about to get in a TIE fighter and escape when they see Mork running into the hangar bay, and then realize that the Imperials have captured the children. The children are the capture of the children is actually not in the book. That's skipped over. But at that point, they have no choice but to surrender because they have to protect the kids.
Yeah, that's after, yeah, because there's a whole chapter from Mork's perspective.
Oh, that chapter rules, in my opinion.
Incredible. I was so happy. And I also have to say something interesting. Kowakian monkey lizards, now this series treats them as pets. I don't know how they've been treated in other EU stuff in general. I can't remember the Salacious Crumb story in Tales from Jabba's Palace off the top of my head. But, like, I always viewed him as a more sentient, like, fully sentient being. To me, like, it felt like he was, like, very much in on, like, you know...
Well, he got the humor.
Yeah,
like,
he's laughing like,
all the time.
oh, like, this guy's gonna die. It's so funny, you know?
It's so funny.
Yeah, but I don't mind this, but, like, he's very much like a pet. Like, because he's not calling, like, it from his perspective, like, Lena and Milo aren't named. It's just these beings that take care of him.
Milo's his boy.
Yeah.
And then also, too, he has a funny name for Crater, too, that I'm trying to figure out. The chapter Hilarious is called Meat and Metal. And
the floating man. That's what Crater...
The floating man. Yeah, that's what he calls Crater, the floating man. And basically, the chapter is about Mork going into the kitchen, finding something to eat, the chef's chasing him out, and then he falls into a garbage chute where Crater's head is, because Tarkin has already taken all the information off of it, he has everything, and he throws the head into the trash compactor, where at this point, Crater has reactivated somehow, and when he hits the trash compactor, and he sees Mork, and he's just...
I want to read a little bit here.
Okay, go right ahead.
He says, it was calling his name. Mork darted around, confused. He could see no people, just a strange domed object with glowing eyes. He moved closer, and that's when he recognized it. Somehow, the floating man's head had become separated from the rest of him. An accident that would have killed Mork, but the floating man had survived. He was speaking very insistently, and he seemed to want something. Mork recognized the tone, if not the words. Then the floating man spoke one syllable that the little monkey lizard recognized. Fetch. Mork looked around eagerly. What could the floating man possibly want in all this rot and junk? He had no way to explain himself. He was just ahead. Mork would have to work it out on his own. It would probably be something metal, because the floating man was metal. Perhaps he was hungry? No, he never seemed to eat. What else would the floating man need? What didn't he have? Then he saw it. Reaching up from the tangle of scrap, a flat disc with 5 extended fingers. Mork leapt toward it, locking his beak on the longest digit. Behind him, he could hear the floating man still talking. Yes, Mork, he was saying. Good, Mork. Good. Mork felt a flush of warm pride down in his belly and set to work. Oh, stunning.
I love this chapter. At this point, the children get separated because Crater shows up, and we don't learn what happens right away, but there's this big, beefy robot body, and there's a tunnel that collapses, and Lena, she gets separated from her parents and Milo. And there's this part here in Chapter 9 where Krennic's droid delivers the Graf family minus Lena to Tarkin, and we'll start here on 113. "Ah, K4, Governor Tarkin said as the black droid marched from the compound, leading Milo and his parents. There were reports of firing in the tunnels. I wondered if you ran into trouble." "It was nothing," the droid repeated. "A blaster malfunction. The Graf girl was injured. I sent her back to her cell with a medical droid." Tarkin's eyes narrowed. "A pity. I would have liked her to be here for this." Why had the droid lied, Milo wondered. He must be ashamed to admit his mistake, frightened of the consequences if Tarkin discovered the truth. The realization that the gleaming brute like K4D8 was afraid of something made Milo feel oddly hopeful. The Imperials might seem unstoppable. They might act like the universe belonged to them. But deep down inside, they had the same fears as everyone else.
Oh. That's how you write about the humanity of the Empire. Just be like, yeah, they're humans. They're just little bitches. I mean, you know, excuse my language, but like they're just little babies that don't like.
They are little babies.
Like anyway, all right. And
then
yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Another part is we figured out how Crater has like a power loader body, and he also has he's missing an arm too that he has replaced with a chainsaw from like a lumbering robot.
This illustration is incredible.
I love
you have
that
to
illustration.
Post like half the illustrations
I
in this
will.
book.
It's incredible. And then basically Lena and Crater, they shut down the power core so that the mushroom people can attack. And Tarkin, in a sort of, I would say, almost like Force Awakens sort of way, he's about to throw a big speech to a big pep rally to rile up his boys as they go kill the mushroom people. And of course it's ruined when the mushroom people start lodging spike spores at them, and then everything goes into chaos from there. And that's when the Graf family gets their opportunity to escape in this, sort of chaos that ensues in this battle. And then what else can I say? Let's see. I have more quotes that are so funny later on, but basically, Heifer.
Let's just say
Heifer.
Yeah.
Heifer. He shows up, and basically, there's blaster fire, and he approaches Tarkin, and he tries to. He says to him, "See, Heifer took a step forward. You are in command here." "I am the authority here on Agaris," the governor agreed. I guess he is governor. Right. "My name is Tarkin." "Tarkin," Heifer said. "Yes, your name is known to us. We have your men." The governor pursed his lips. "I thought as much. Are they dead?" "No," Heifer said. "They are simply sleeping. If you leave this planet, they will be returned to you." Tarkin gave a dismissive wave. "If those men were foolish enough to get captured, I have no use for them."
Oh my god, so hard. Tarkin's the only Imperial character that I just like. That I like. Yeah, he's so cool, even though he's obviously a piece of shit. I know. All other Imperial whatever, they feel like weasels to me. Like Tarkin, mm-hmm. I'm just like, this guy is a master manipulator,
Tarkin, in my opinion, is the only one who is on the same page as Sheev in terms of that the Empire must conquest at all costs. He is the most on Sheev's page as to anybody else, more so than Vader, in my opinion. So anyway, Tarkin, he's trying to take the Graf family away, and that doesn't quite work out. He ends up having to hop in his shuttle and take off. A big battle ensues in this hangar. At one point, Milo saw his father wrap his hands around a trooper's throat. They don't go into that any further.
I know, that felt like, that should be followed up on, maybe. But.
That's all they say about that. Okay, and then Heifer gets a blaster, and that droid, K4, he has Milo, and he's like, I'm gonna shoot the kid. And Heifer, this part is crazy. Alright. I will destroy you first. Heifer raised the blaster, aiming at K4's gleaming head. They were the same height, the metal monster and slender Argarian. Release him, or I will use your own weapon to finish you. I don't believe you, K4 replied. You are weak, and you will not kill me. Heifer said nothing, his hand trembling as he gripped the gun tighter. It's a machine, Ryza urged him. It's not alive. Take the shot. Remember, the Agarians have no eyes.
Oh, yes, I forgot.
Heifer glanced at her, confused. It speaks, he said. It thinks. It's not the same, Auric joined his wife. Do it! Save Milo! Heifer looked down at the blaster and then up at the droid. Milo could see the conflict on his smooth gray face. Then slowly he lowered the gun. It is a sentient being. I cannot kill it. Whew. And then boom. I, however, do not have that problem. A voice boomed from the back of the hangar deep in a shadow. K4 spun around, pulling Milo with him. Something was emerging from the darkness. He heard the whine of a power saw. Put him down, Crater demanded, striding forward. Now! And then this opens a huge battle bot sequence where K4 and Crater duke it out. And I loved this chapter. This chapter was incredible. And, this ends up with Crater. He ends up getting knocked down. The servos in his legs are damaged. And, this K4 character is about to deliver the final blow. And at this point, the children refuse to watch Crater get killed. And they start attacking K4. Even though their parents are like, no, don't do it. And that part is... And there's a part, too, where Lena, she has a pipe. And she holds it like a lightsaber, like the Jedi that she was told about in stories, and she starts striking the droid. Milo starts striking the droid, and then you think the kids are going to be killed by him, and that's when Crater comes in with his big chainsaw hand, and he just decapitates the droid right then and there. It's insane.
Yeah, I know. It's wild that this series came down to a droid battle. I was not expecting that at all. But so yeah, basically Tarkin's left. All the Imperials are leaving. The fungus people, the mushroom people are letting all the stormtroopers go. And Heifer says that. Even though, they're like, oh, well, Tarkin's going to be back, and he's just like, yeah, we'll just go to another planet. We've been to other planets before. This isn't our home planet. And, they're like, this has to have been thousands of years of, and he's just like, yeah, I'm, how old are you? He's just like, I do not measure time the way you do.
He says, I have seen stars be born and stars die.
Yeah,
that's how much he alludes to how old he is. And the scene where... they leave is crazy because the Grafs are in the repaired Imperial ship. They're about to take off, and then spores start leaking into the ship, and from the spores they can hear Heifer's voice. And this is where Heifer explains all of this. And then they look out the cockpit, and then suddenly the whole world starts shaking, and all the mushroom kingdom is all engulfed, and these seeds are shot out into the atmosphere, and the parents are like, well, I guess that's how they travel to different planets. And they're like, they're going straight for the sun, and it's they need the gravity of the sun to travel. It's this really crazy sequence. And basically what happens there is the parents decide, well, they're like, okay, we're gonna keep you guys safe.
Gonna go to a nice peaceful
uncharted
world,
planet.
Uncharted planet.
Yep, and you guys are going to be safe. And at this point, the kids are like, no, like, the Empire is causing, like, all this unjust in the world. And there's actually a chapter where Lena and Crater are talking, and they're talking about their development, like their actual character development throughout this whole story, and how, like, Crater has become brave through all of this, and, like, and so have the children, and that the children can, and they kind of reflect on the fact that, like, oh yeah, we had our parents taken away from us. And Lena goes, and I suspect that, like, that's happening to other children in the galaxy too. And Crater's like, I know, I think about them often.
And so there's a thing at the end here where, like, the parents are like, but Crater, you got to be on our side. We want to go to a safe planet because you're programmed to protect the children. He's just like, not just your children, all children.
and so they convince their parents, like, no, we need to go help the rebels. We need to go help the Bridgers. And then Crater's like, oh, well, guess what? I've already plotted a trip to Lothal. Let's go. So
they're headed off to Lothal, and that's the end of the.
That's the end of the book.
That's
the end of the story.
Which I thought was a fitting end. I actually would be down to revisit these characters. I don't know if they've ever appeared in anything else.
I know Milo and Mork have appeared in Star Wars Adventures comics from IDW that I'm pretty sure Kevin or Tom wrote, and Dave Busain, I believe is how you say it. He actually he does the art for it.
Oh, so. That's cool.
Yeah. So it's still, like, within the universe.
All right, I'd be curious to check those out. That's not in the scope of the show. But I would be curious to check those out. So, but yeah, I thought this ended really well, and I gave the last book a 9 out of 10. I think I'll stick with that. I don't think this series ever quite reached 10. Well, maybe 10, because we have the conceived midichlorians. It's never been conceived, I feel like.
No, not conceived.
I'm willing to go to 10 for this last book, just to give props to a very good series that I really enjoyed.
Mm-hmm. And that's exactly, I'm giving it a 10 too, because I thought it was the best ending that it could be for this series. And, like, I was super dismissive of, like, Crater at the beginning of these books.
I've loved Crater the whole time. That's my best. That take is aged so well. He's such a king.
Oh my god. Speaking of Crater, at the end of the book, they have the image of all of them in the cockpit, and Crater, if you remember, his, like, body got, like, impaled, his astromech body, so he puts his head back, but on the probe droid lower half, so, like, he has no torso. But I love Crater. I love the BattleBots scene, because it's like they have, like, a huge fight scene. All the stuff with Tarkin is great in this book. Just this book and I think speaking of the series as a whole, what I liked about the series as a whole is that we had a charted path this whole time. Is like, they're going to find their parents. There's no way they're not going to find their parents by the end of this story.
My only big criticism, I will say, of the series in general, is that I wish that more of their own kind of... I wish the way they found their parents happened more because of, like, them finding clues and, like, you know what I mean? Like, their own initiative rather than just that information getting dropped on them. You know what I mean? That's probably my biggest criticism just narratively of the series. Mm-hmm. That, like, every time some big new clue about their parents came, it wasn't from them, like, figuring it out on their own. It was, like, a third party came in and was like, this is the next place you gotta go. So, it's fine. It wasn't, like, a huge problem, but...
Yeah. But overall, I really like this series. I like this ending. I had a great time with this book. So, 10 midichlorians.
There we go.
I'm going to flavor it Crater, too. Crater, if
there's ever a Force-sensitive droid, it would be R2-D2, I guess, in Force Awakens.
Yes.
but then Crater would be my second option.
Then Crater. And Mork. Mork is the king.
Mork rules.
Mork
is an absolute king. Yeah, I wonder if they should make it canonically that Kowakian monkey lizards are from the planet Orc. All right.
Based on Mork alone. All right.
But, so like, ORQ instead of ORK, like.
Mm-hmm.
That'd be good. All right. So yeah, this was a great time. We're returning next week to Junior Jedi Knights with Anakin's Quest.
Which is by a new author at this point. I believe these are...
Rebecca Moesta.
Yes, it is.
So very exciting. We're going to read... we're going to get back to that series, wrap that up. Only 3 of those to go. And we'll also be discussing, as we mentioned, The Quest for Camelot, the animated film from 1998. Check it out. But otherwise, we're done for the week.
We're done. So until the books are due back,
the library is closed. Padawan Library is hosted and produced by Tim May and Levi Peretic. It is edited by Tim May. Our theme song is by The Astral Project. Our artwork is by Freddie Funbuns. Padawan Library is copyright 2021. Tim May and Levi Peretic. All rights reserved.